It's for self-reflection. You might need it. I'm not the type of guy who wakes up on Father's Day expecting a parade, but after 12 years of marriage and 2 kids, I figured I'd at least get something better than becoming the punchline to a joke I didn't see coming. That Sunday morning in June started like any other. The Arizona sun was already beating through our kitchen windows at 7 a.m., and I shuffled downstairs in my old Navy PT shorts, thinking maybe today would be different. Maybe today I'd actually feel appreciated, instead of just being the guy who brings home $85K a year and fixes everything that breaks around this house. My wife, Melissa, was already in the kitchen with her favorite coffee mug, the one that says, "But first coffee," like it's the most profound statement ever made. Our daughter, Chloe, was perched on the counter scrolling through her phone, and my son, Zach, was hovering near the doorway with this look on his face like he was trying really hard not to laugh about something. I should have seen the warning signs. Melissa had been different for months, maybe even a year. It started subtle. Eye rolls when I'd explain how to properly use the drill she'd borrowed, comments about my obsession with organizing my tools. She used to appreciate that I could fix anything, solve any household problem. Somewhere along the way, that appreciation curdled into resentment. The transformation really accelerated after she started those yoga classes downtown. Suddenly, our conversations were peppered with phrases about toxic masculinity and emotional intelligence. She'd come home from her sessions talking about reclaiming feminine space and how men dominated too much of the household energy. I thought it was just a phase, like when she got really into CrossFit for 6 months and everything was about burpees. But this was different. This had teeth. "Happy Father's Day, honey," Melissa practically sang, holding out this plain cardboard box with a huge grin. The kind of grin that should have been a warning sign, but I was still operating under the assumption that my own family wouldn't deliberately humiliate me. "Open it, Dad!" Chloe bounced excitedly, her phone now pointed at me, because apparently this moment needed to be documented for posterity. At 16, she'd become Melissa's shadow, absorbing every eye roll, every dismissive comment about Dad's projects taking up too much space. I took the box because what else was I supposed to do? Opened it, peeling back the flaps, and inside was a white ceramic mug nestled in tissue paper. For a split second, I thought maybe it would say something normal. World's Best Dad would have been fine. Even World's Okay Dad would have gotten a genuine laugh from me. But what it actually said, in big bold letters, was World's Biggest Disappointment. The silence stretched for about 3 seconds while my brain tried to process what I was seeing. I just stood there holding this mug like it was evidence in a crime scene, waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding, here's your real gift." But that moment never came. Instead, they started laughing. Not little giggles, but full-on doubled-over, can't-breathe laughter. Melissa was wiping tears from her eyes. Chloe was slapping the counter. Even Zach looked uncomfortable, but was still filming every second of my humiliation with his phone. "Oh my God, your face," Melissa managed to gasp between laughs. "I told you he'd be shocked. It's hilarious, right?" "It's perfect," Chloe added, still recording. "You should see yourself, Dad. You look like someone just told you Santa isn't real." My face tried to decide between crying and rage-quitting life, but instead it settled on something worse, a smile. A big fake smile that made my face hurt, because that's what I always did in this house. I smiled, went along with it, played the good sport. Darren the reliable, Darren the pushover, Darren who could take a joke even when the joke was his entire existence. "Thanks," I said, even throwing in a little laugh. "I've always wanted my self-esteem in ceramic form. Really, this is perfect." That made them laugh even harder, of course. Melissa came over and patted my shoulder like I was a dog who'd just learned a trick. "See, I knew you'd get it. You always have such a good sense of humor about things." Yeah, a good sense of humor. That's what we're calling slowly dying inside while maintaining a socially acceptable facade. I'd been having a good sense of humor about a lot of things lately, like when Melissa announced she was converting my workshop into her yoga studio 6 weeks ago. Like when she started inviting her yoga friends over for goddess circles, where they'd drink wine and talk about how men just don't understand emotional intelligence. Like when those same friends would ask me to fix their husband's botched DIY projects while simultaneously rolling their eyes about masculine incompetence. I set the mug down carefully and noticed breakfast was already laid out. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, except none of it was for me. They'd already eaten. The dishes were piled in the sink, crusty with syrup and egg residue. "Oh, we already ate," Melissa said casually. "We thought you'd sleep in longer. But hey, feel free to make yourself something." Feel free, like it was a privilege, like I hadn't been getting up at 5:30 a.m. for 12 years to make sure this family had everything they needed, like I hadn't spent last Saturday installing a new garbage disposal, while Melissa complained that the sound of power tools was disruptive to her chakras. "No problem," I said, still smiling. "I'll just clean these up first." And I did. I stood at that sink, scrubbing dried pancake batter, while they moved to the living room, their laughter fading into background noise. As I worked, my hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of cleaning up after everyone else, I thought about the progression of how I'd gotten here. 12 years ago, Melissa loved that I could build her anything she wanted. Custom shelves for her book collection, a garden trellis that was the envy of the neighborhood, a home office that maximized every square foot of available space. She'd brag to her friends about her handy husband who could solve any problem. When did that admiration become irritation? When did my competence become something to mock rather than appreciate? The answer came to me as I scrubbed egg residue off a plate. It was when she stopped needing me to be competent and started needing me to be wrong. When my solutions became problems, when my knowledge became mansplaining, when my 15 years of professional construction experience became something to dismiss rather than respect. I thought about that workshop conversion again. $15,000 worth of professional-grade tools, organized with the precision that comes from years of job sites where knowing exactly where your equipment is can mean the difference between finishing on time and losing a contract. She'd moved it all to the garage in one afternoon, didn't even ask, just announced it was happening. "I need the space for my practice," she'd said when I came home from installing HVAC systems at a new medical complex downtown. "The energy in that room is perfect for yoga. You understand, right? It's just tools. Just tools, like saying a surgeon's instruments are just sharp metal, or a pilot's controls are just buttons and switches. Those tools represented my identity, my capability, my value to this family, and she'd box them up like Christmas decorations. Standing at that sink on Father's Day, holding a mug that said, "World's Biggest Disappointment," I finally understood what had happened. Somewhere along the way, Melissa had decided that my worth was negotiable. That the man who'd built the deck where she practiced morning meditation, who'd wired the outlets for her essential oil diffusers, who'd plumbed the bathroom where she took her stress relief baths, was somehow the problem. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, after I'd smiled through dinner and said goodnight like everything was normal, I packed a bag. Just the essentials, clothes, my tool belt, and whatever dignity I had left. I didn't leave a note. What would have been the point? "Sorry I disappointed you by existing" seemed a bit melodramatic, even for this situation. I got in my company truck, a 2018 Ford F-250 with the construction company logo on the side, and drove until I found myself at a Hampton Inn off I-10. $49 a night with my BOA discount, and for that premium price you got clean sheets, working Wi-Fi, and the beautiful anonymity of no one caring why you were there. The guy at the front desk didn't even look up when I checked in, just slid me a key card and went back to watching SportsCenter. No questions, no judgment, just impersonal business. After 12 years of having every decision scrutinized and every preference dismissed, the indifference was like a cool breeze. I turned off my phone and spent 2 weeks in what I can only describe as emotional decompression. I'd wake up, grab coffee from the lobby that tasted like it had been brewed in a tire, and just sit. No one asking me to fix anything while simultaneously criticizing how I was fixing it. No one laughing at my expense while I provided for their comfort. Just silence and the distant hum of interstate traffic. On day 15, curiosity got the better of me. I turned my phone back on to a barrage of digital chaos. 23 missed calls from Melissa, 47 text messages ranging from concern to anger to threats about legal action. But the thing that made my blood run cold was the Nextdoor post I discovered through a notification from my construction foreman, Wade. Melissa had written this heartfelt plea that would have made a soap opera writer proud. "Please, if anyone has seen my husband Darren Hawkins, tell him his family just wants him home. We love him and miss him desperately. He's been struggling with some personal issues and we're worried about his mental health. Any information would be appreciated." Attached was a photo of me from last summer's neighborhood barbecue, wearing my grill sergeant apron and actually looking happy. She'd chosen the picture carefully. I looked stable, competent, like someone's reliable neighbor who definitely shouldn't be missing. The comment section was brutal. 150-plus neighbors I'd helped with their plumbing issues, electrical problems, fence repairs, deck construction, all praying for my safe return. People who'd seen me install their ceiling fans and unclog their garbage disposals were sharing the post, adding their own concerns about my mental state. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down. Darren fixed our water heater last winter in the middle of that cold snap. Such a good man, praying he comes home safely. Bob Martinez from the corner house. He helped me build my shed last spring, never asked for anything in return. Hope he's okay. Julie Morrison, whose kitchen sink I'd repaired twice. Always so helpful and professional. This is so unlike him. Melissa, stay strong. Not one person knew she'd given me that mug. Not one person had seen the months of eye rolls, dismissive comments, and systematic erosion of respect that had led to this moment. They saw her performance, the concerned wife desperately searching for her troubled husband, and bought it completely. Wade called me that Tuesday morning, his voice tight with concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. Dude, your wife's posting on every social media platform known to man. She's got half the construction crew thinking you're having some kind of breakdown. You need to get ahead of this before it affects your reputation. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. This was about my professional standing in a community where trust and reliability are everything. In construction, your reputation follows you from job to job. One whisper that you're unstable, unreliable, prone to just disappearing, and suddenly contracts dry up. Project managers start questioning whether they can count on you to finish what you start. Wade continued, and I could hear the uncomfortable position I'd put him in. Look, I've been covering for you, telling people you're taking some personal time. But that next door post is spreading. People are asking questions. Management's starting to notice. I spent that first month in a fog, going through the motions of rebuilding a life I'd never planned to leave. The apartment I found was a 1-bedroom place for $1,400 a month. Nothing fancy but clean, with a small balcony where I could sit with my morning coffee and actually think without someone needing me to solve their problems. The silence was initially deafening after years of constant chaos. But gradually I started to appreciate it. The breakthrough came during a Tuesday night veterans group meeting at the VFW Hall downtown. I'd been going for years, but never really opened up. Just listened to other guys work through their struggles with civilian life, employment issues, relationship problems. That night, something shifted. Jerry Kowalski, a Marine who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan, was talking about disappointment and expectations. He was a big guy, probably 6'4", with hands like catcher's mitts, but his voice was gentle when he spoke about his own family's struggles. You know what disappointment really is? Jerry said, leaning back in his folding chair. It's when people set expectations for you based on what they need, not who you are. My ex-wife needed me to be this broken warrior she could fix, made her feel important. When I got my head straight and didn't need fixing anymore, suddenly I was the problem. He looked around the circle of 8 guys. Construction workers, mechanics, a retired police sergeant, a few guys still trying to find their footing after discharge. You can disappoint toxic people by refusing to enable their toxicity. That's not failure, that's growth. Sitting there surrounded by men who understood what it meant to serve something bigger than yourself, I realized I'd been serving the wrong things. I'd been serving people who saw my devotion as weakness rather than strength. Anyone else dealing with family stuff? Jerry asked, and before I could stop myself, I was talking. I told them about the mug, about the workshop conversion, about Melissa's transformation from partner to critic, about how I'd become the family disappointment while still being expected to solve every problem and fund every comfort. Tony Martinez, the retired sergeant, nodded knowingly. My wife used to do that. Make fun of my obsession with keeping my tools organized, then call me when she needed something hung or fixed. Can't have it both ways. The thing that gets me, added Kevin Walsh, a plumber who'd served in Iraq, is they want us to be strong enough to handle everything, but sensitive enough to never have feelings about how they treat us. It's an impossible standard. That conversation gave me a framework for understanding what had happened. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't actually a disappointment. I was just refusing to play a rigged game anymore. 3 weeks later, I did something that seemed crazy at the time, but felt absolutely right. I started a YouTube channel called Honest Tool Reviews. I'd been using professional-grade equipment for 15 years, knew which brands lived up to their marketing, and which were overpriced garbage that would leave you stranded on a job site. My phone propped on a stack of books in my apartment kitchen. I recorded my first video about circular saws that actually delivered on their promises. This is a Milwaukee M18 Fuel, costs about $180 without the battery. I've been using it on commercial sites for 2 years, and here's what they don't tell you in the commercials. I talked about battery life under real working conditions, how it performed cutting through different materials, whether the depth adjustment actually stayed put when you were working overhead. Real information from someone who'd actually used these tools to make a living, not some guy in a showroom reading spec sheets. The response was immediate and hungry. Construction guys, weekend warriors, homeowners who were tired of buying tools that broke after 6 months. They found the channel and started subscribing. The comment section became this community of people sharing their own experiences, asking questions, making recommendations. Within 3 months, I had 15,000 subscribers and was making $800 to $1,200 a month from ad revenue. Companies started reaching out, wanting to send me products to review. Not the big-name brands at first, but smaller manufacturers who were confident their tools could stand up to honest scrutiny. They'd pay $200 to $500 for a thorough, unbiased review. For the first time in years, people were valuing my expertise instead of taking it for granted. Every positive comment, every "this saved me from buying junk" message, every subscriber who said my videos helped them make better decisions. It was validation I hadn't realized I desperately needed. My apartment started filling up with packages, cordless drills, impact drivers, specialty bits, measuring tools, safety equipment. I'd test everything thoroughly, usually bringing them to job sites where Wade and the crew would put them through real-world conditions. "You're becoming famous, man," Wade said one afternoon as I filmed a review of a new pneumatic nail gun. "My wife showed me your channel, says you explain things better than those other YouTube guys." That meant something. Wade had been in construction longer than me, had seen every tool trend come and go. His approval carried weight. The channel grew organically. I never paid for promotion, never used clickbait titles, just honest assessments from someone who actually used these tools for a living. DeWalt 20V hammer drill, 6-month real-world test, or why that $40 Harbor freight angle grinder might actually be worth it. 6 months after leaving, I had my first sponsor deal with a safety equipment company. They wanted me to review their new line of work, gloves and safety glasses. $500 for an honest assessment, with the understanding that if the products were garbage, I'd say so. The gloves were excellent. Genuine leather that didn't stiffen up after getting wet. Reinforcement in all the right places. The safety glasses were overpriced for what they delivered. I said exactly that in my review, and the company thanked me for the honest feedback and asked me to test their next iteration. That's when I knew this was more than just a hobby. This was respect. This was recognition of expertise built over years of actual experience. This was the opposite of everything I'd been getting at home. Meanwhile, my savings account was growing for the first time in years, without the constant drain of Melissa's projects, the yoga studio renovation, the organic everything grocery bills, the essential oils that cost more per ounce than decent bourbon. I was actually building an emergency fund. $18,000 after 8 months. Real security. The kind that meant I could handle whatever life threw at me without panic. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself, instead of constantly trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. That's where I was emotionally when Zach started reaching out. Not through Melissa or any family drama, but directly. He'd gotten my number somehow, probably from my work voicemail, and sent a simple text. "Can we meet for breakfast Saturday? Just us." We met at Rosie's Diner downtown, a classic place with red vinyl booths and waitresses who'd been there since the Carter administration. Zach looked older than his 13 years, like he'd been carrying weight that wasn't his to bear. "Mom keeps asking where you went," he said over pancakes, not quite meeting my eyes. "She acts like you just vanished into thin air." "What do you tell her?" that maybe she should have thought about that before she made you feel like garbage. Hearing those words from my 13-year-old son, words that showed he'd been watching, understanding, processing what had really happened, hit me harder than I expected. This kid had been absorbing the family dynamics, seeing through the performance, recognizing the pattern of disrespect even when he couldn't articulate it. The mug was messed up, Dad. I knew it when she bought it. I told her it wasn't funny. What did she say? That you needed to learn to laugh at yourself more, that you took everything too seriously. He poked at his pancakes. But you weren't taking things too seriously. You were just tired of being the joke. We started meeting every other Saturday after that. Sometimes we talked about serious stuff, how things were at home, what life had been like before the yoga phase, how he felt caught between loyalty to his mother and respect for his father. Other times we just talked about normal teenage stuff, school, friends, the girl he had a crush on in algebra class. Those breakfast meetings became my anchor, proof that I'd done something right in 13 years of being his dad. Whatever mistakes I'd made, however I'd failed as a husband, I'd managed to raise a son who could see truth through manipulation. Meanwhile, Melissa's Next Door campaign was backfiring spectacularly. Someone had screenshotted her posts and shared them in a local Facebook group dedicated to neighborhood drama. People started asking questions. If I was having such serious mental health issues, why wasn't she focusing on getting me help instead of social media sympathy? If I was really missing, shouldn't she be filing police reports instead of posting on apps? The construction community in Phoenix isn't huge. Word travels fast when someone's reputation gets questioned, and Wade made sure the right people heard the right version of events. Not my personal business, that stayed private, but the professional facts. I wasn't having a breakdown. I wasn't unreliable. I was dealing with family issues and maintaining my work commitments. 8 months after I left, Melissa finally tracked down my direct number and called. The conversation was everything I expected, and nothing like I'd prepared for. Darren, we need to talk about the divorce papers. Straight to business. No, how are you? No, the kids miss you. Just immediate focus on legal logistics. What about them? You can't just disappear and expect to keep everything. The house, your retirement account, the truck, your tools. That last part hit different. My tools were still in her garage, boxed up like evidence of a crime that hadn't been committed yet. Melissa, you wanted to know why I changed? Silence on the other end. You did too, when you gave away what was mine. Your workshop? I needed that space for not just the workshop, my dignity, my role as a father, my right to basic respect in my own home. You gave all of that away the day you handed me that mug and filmed me opening it. The silence stretched longer this time. When she finally spoke, her voice had shifted from businesslike to defensive. It was just a joke, Darren. You always used to have a sense of humor. Jokes are supposed to be funny, Melissa. That was cruelty dressed up as humor, and you taught our kids that it was acceptable to treat me that way. I never taught them to... Chloe filmed it. She was laughing. You all were laughing while I cleaned up your breakfast dishes and pretended it didn't hurt. You turned Father's Day into a performance where I was the villain in my own story. The conversation ended with lawyers' names exchanged and a timeline for dividing assets that felt both too fast and long overdue. 3 months later, Chloe sent me an email that started with, "I'm sorry," and ended with something I never expected, genuine accountability. She'd been watching my YouTube videos, reading comments from people who respected my expertise, seeing me as something other than the family disappointment. The cognitive dissonance finally broke through her 16-year-old certainty. "I didn't understand what we were doing to you," she wrote. "I thought we were just teasing. I didn't realize we were being mean. I'm working on being better, and I hope someday you'll want to talk to me again." I wrote back the same day. Coffee was offered. She never took me up on it, but knowing she'd grown enough to see the situation clearly was enough for now. The mug still sits on my kitchen counter, holding pens instead of pain. People ask why I keep it if it reminds me of bad times. But it doesn't remind me of pain anymore. It reminds me of the moment I chose myself over people who couldn't see my value. They thought that mug would define me. They were right, just not how they intended. It defined the moment I stopped accepting unacceptable treatment. The moment I realized that being called a disappointment by people who didn't appreciate me was better than being valued by people who only saw me as a resource to exploit. My YouTube channel now has 28,000 subscribers and generates enough income to cover my rent and groceries. The apartment is small but peaceful. My emergency fund has grown to $24,000. Zach and I still meet for breakfast every other Saturday, and he started asking about learning to use tools properly. When Melissa asked why I'd changed, the answer was simple. I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped pretending that their version of me was acceptable. She'd changed from the woman who used to appreciate my efforts into someone who gave away everything that mattered to me without a second thought. Some changes are worth making. Some people are worth disappointing. And that mug, it's the best gift they ever gave me because it set me free.